Hello, grown black folks talk. So, if as a black woman you were in Miss Lewis's position, what do you do next? So, we've been discussing, for this is now the second day, I've been thinking about Nicole Lewis and her having come online and talked about not seeing men as part of her practice and talking about what happened to how men treat her. They won't come from consultation, but they have very disrespectful things to say in their DMs, and she's not the one or the two, and she will cuss someone out. Again, this is not meant to critique Miss Lewis. She has a right to human self-expression. She is a United States citizen. Her right to freedom of speech is to be protected. But what do you do? And I mentioned that there is a dispute between the Move in Silence crowd and the Speak Out Now crowd. And this argument will not be resolved. Um, and I have nothing except that I said in our last video, since people are very much entrenched in their positions. And instead of furthering the argument, talking about what we should do and what we could do, okay, let's talk about, since I said that what we want to do is build possible networks, something else that I said in that last video is, okay, how do we build a power base? I was having further discussion today about the challenge. And part of the move in silence position is simply that if you're in an unstable position, you are in grave danger when you get more attention of the same people. It's just like, okay, we're going to talk about black men and femicide and how it happens 4 times a day. This means that you probably want to make yourself a small target as possible. It's one thing to have 10 black men mad at you. 1/3 of black men are convicted felons. So we're not talking about misdemeanor, pity pat criminals. No, we're talking about convicted felons. These are men who have very little left to lose since their civil rights have been stripped. Getting a job, not so much. Having legal money, not so much. So getting into legal employment, not so much. So people settle sometimes into a criminal lifestyle, don't have much to lose. Going back to jail or to prison means a solid 3 meals a day. So if you have the attention of 10 men, that's 3 of those men. If you get the attention of 10,000, that's more than 3,300. So the move in silence crowd says, okay, one of the reasons you want to move in silence is to make a small target. Now, the speak out now crowd is of the mind, though, that the more black women speak out, the more safe, because there's safety in numbers, and the more people will realize this is a mass problem. Both do not have a firm answer to, okay, if you choose to speak out now, what do you do next? The right conversation for the move in silence crowd cannot be, well, whatever happens to you happens. That's not the correct answer, because we have to care more about each other. And the speak out now crowd needs an answer too, because when all this has gone away, you're still going to have 3 out of every 10 black men who've been angered about this with that particular background. Actually, more than 3 out of 10, 1/3, 30% to 33%. So she's still going to have to deal with this wherever she lives. And we know that law enforcement does not go hard for black women the way it does for white women. We know this. So then what do you do in a situation like this? Now, I'm sure Miss Lewis is handling her own business perfectly well. I am not advising her. But what would you do in either crowd? So either you do it, the moving silence crowd says, do these things in advance, or just do what you're going to do and you avoid this problem. That's our position. That's our position. Because if you do the things you mean to do, well, doing is talk is cheap. Action walks, action talks and BS walks. That's our position on this. Nonetheless, you would end up doing some of the same things. So if you're moving in silence, what are you doing? Well, you can do some of this afterwards as well. So what I want to do is kind of bring out the things that we can build together. Okay, first of all, if you're going to be doing things that are going to cause you to meet resistance in an extremely violent community in an extremely violent country, because if you're going to tick off all men, remember the men in Charlottesville and the men of January 6th were not black. So you got to think about that as well. Although generally for black women, the resistance does not come as much from that side, but we're not that far past Fannie Lou Hamer and the civil rights period. So the first thing you want to do is, okay, you need to assess what is your personal safety situation. Are you living in a place where you can go home safely? You kind of need to figure that out. Are you living in a place which has good security? This is why Tony Gaskins says that if you can, if you, especially if you're a single mother with children right now, what you want to do is save your money, and if you can afford it, get to somewhere. Your goal should be to move to somewhere that actually has gated security. What you want to do is to make sure that the people, because of the violence of the time in which we're living, you want to make sure that the place where you're living has people that are going to see who comes in and goes out. Now, that can make your life difficult as a Black woman because a lot of people, I get checked in my own neighborhood for relationships with out of control Black men here. I don't have relationships with them, but there are always people checking. White people are constantly checking to see if Black men who are out of pocket are any way related to me, because Black men in this neighborhood are just seen as an outright threat. And I can understand how Black men may find it frustrating to be profiled in that way because of the nature of who sold drugs in this area. People know about Felix Mitchell. People know about who pushed crack and heroin and all the rest of it here. So that comes with the idea of what that also deals with what are your associations. Because if you know 10 Black men, if you don't know them, you don't know if you have convicted felons closer to you than others. So think about, okay, if you're going across the gap to the speak out now crowd, then you want to know what those situations are. And if you do not have good knowledge of it, that's where move in silence comes back and says you need to move in silence until you have that together for your own personal safety. Because when you don't, the computer, the keyboard warriors are not the ones who are actually going to kill you. There are going to be people in this world that will put their hands on you. It may be televised because someone will televise it, but that's not where the trouble's going to start. The trouble's going to start when everybody has moved on to the next story and nobody's watching your back. So that's something you want to take care of. What is your personal security? What is your economic security? Do you have a backup plan should someone go to the board, should you not be able to do your profession anymore? Now, I know there are people that I know that get very upset when we talk about professionalism, but professionalism is for your protection also. If you need to be in the profession, it behooves you to follow the rules. There are certain rules for doctors, there are certain rules for lawyers, there are certain rules for mental health professionals, including therapists, there are certain rules for public servants, there are certain rules for government officials, there are certain rules for people who are on nonprofit boards, there are certain best practices for all of these things. If you need the job, it behooves you to stay within the bounds of the best practices because the best practices protect you and your ability. And see, the reason that we get confused about this is we're all so happy about Black women getting degrees, but you having a degree and getting a degree job means that you are expected to understand. You're supposed to be able to study and understand that there are certain rules that go for wherever you work. And when you step outside the line, you step outside the professional protection. So if you're going to do that, then what you have to do is have a backup plan. Part of what you need to be doing is asset building. Now, if you lose your job and all you understand is earned income, this is going to make it very hard for you to do this. So, what you want to do is try to have these things in place before you decide to become active on certain issues, before you decide to take on between 13 million and 4 billion people and open yourself to a charge. Then a bigotry that may cost you your job, you want to make sure that you have more than earned income going through your life. This is your job. This is your earned income. If your profession disappeared, do you have a business? Do you have investments? If you don't have those things, you want to get those things because those things give you the freedom. If you're in a profession and the rules no longer serve you and are no longer keeping you safe, you need to have fallback positions. This is why we have a playlist about my crypto journey here. And there, you have Black women making money and Woke Mommy and all these channels and Stephanie Perry showing you how to do even alternative things that don't involve you having to deal with anybody's corporate or professional rules. Well, there are rules for house sitting as well. There are rules for being able to travel the world as well. But what I'm saying is, you have to be economically secure because when you take on men in a patriarchy, you are likely to have to pay a high price for that. So, what do we do? we build assets so we can afford to step away if that's what's necessary. Do you have an emergency fund so that you can find your next thing? If you lose your job, if you lose your profession, do you have the next thing? Now, if you don't have these things, then it comes back to, again, then it comes back to us as Black women doing the networking work necessary to be able to tide people over. Again, I'm not saying if you don't have this done ahead of time, you get what you get. No, that's not a ethical, moral, or reasonable position. Sometimes speaking out now is just what people are called to do. Like I said, I'm not criticizing Ms. Lewis. For all I know, the Spirit of God may have just told her to speak. It's possible. I mean, Christians for millennia have not been able to arrange everything they want to arrange. The prophets of God were not able to arrange everything they wanted to arrange. Sometimes speak out now is what you have to do. And because it depends on who you are, what your situation is. So if you don't have these things built, then it behooves us as Black women, whether we are in the Move in Silence crowd or we are in the Speak Out Now crowd, to be able to access these things so that we can make them available should somebody need it. If you're in a situation like Nicole Lewis and your life begins to be threatened and your position is not safe, well, someone needs to either, with Black women, then what's going to happen is the local Black women, and local is very relative, but that means that Black women around her who are giving her support need to be able to find her a place to be able to safely lay her head. If she's going to lose a certain amount of clients, I know that she is doing something different just for Black women. I think I have the link right, but sometimes because internet searching can be so interesting when you're already tired. But when I find this link or someone drops it to me, I will put it on my community page so that we can give her support. So if she has enough Black women clients, then she can replace that income. Now, if she ends up if the board ends up yanking her credentials because of this, then she's going to have to find a whole new profession. Well, okay. Well, then what? Well, I mean, for everybody of those of you who just think it's wonderful for Black women to speak out, I hope you're ready to put your wallets out. Because this woman is going to have to be able to live safely until she finds something else. See, the thing is, the time for us making martyrs out of other people is over. Ain't nobody Jesus. So just because we want to be vindicated, we want to see people saying what we're saying and agreeing with us, we are not going to be able to ethically, morally, reasonably just step away and just let stuff happen. Now we got to pick people. People are going to speak out for us, and we got to be able to pick them up. And if you're not ready for all that, that's where Move in Silence comes back in. If you assume that you're pretty much going to be on your own and you don't have a supportive community, Move in Silence is the most reasonable way to go. If we are going to be supporting one another beyond running our fingers in our mouths on social media, then Speak Out Now becomes much more viable. I know that this argument is not going to be solved. What I'm saying is these are things we need to think about to support Black women who choose to come into the open. People like me who move in silence keep resources in silence. There are a whole lot more of us than you will ever know, because what do? We move in silence. If we deal with certain things about our security, you'll know when you find out. If we engage in asset building, you'll know when you find out. So, but there are a lot of us out there. And like I said, it's probably time for us to not be of the mind that if you don't do it the way we want you to do it, then we don't care what happens to you. We got to get past that. I mean, that's always a human temptation because we want to be right and we want to be vindicated. But that is not the correct position for us to be in. We're going to have to come on board because we need a certain number of people to speak out now to move the conversation forward. And we need a certain number of people that are not speaking out who pool resources that are not under attack at any particular moment. It's going to take all of us. If we as Black women, let's just assume that 50 million Black people, 33 million adults, have been convinced that we're no longer good for each other. Now, that's actually not the case. The convincing has not yet, social media is not the whole world. It's just not. But let's assume that that's true. That would put 18 million Black people women in position to have to run an entire Black economy without the men. And that also means taking care of most of the, well, even that's not true. Only a quarter of Black women are single mothers. Even that doesn't work out. But we will have to have much more of an economy where we support each other. As I said on the Winter Spring Bible Study, that means that our discretionary level up looking cute money may have to go to help another Black woman be safe. If we're going to do Speak Out Now in an exceptionally violent world where 1/3 of Black men are felons, this is what we're talking about. So if you want Black women to come out into the open, great. When all the computers go off, all of those women are going to need safety and economic protection. And all the chatting on social media is not going to do that. This video is not monetized and raises no one any money. So we're going to do Speak Out Now that we got to put our money where our mouth is. Because the next time someone speaks out near you and finds herself in trouble, what's she going to do and what are you going to be ready to help her with? That's the question. If you're encouraging people to speak out, great. Get ready. And if you can't handle this, this is why move in silence is important. But the community is not going to decide. Black women are not going to be able to come to a solution about this. So what I would suggest we do is be able to look at, okay, if it happened to you, if you were in that position, what would you need to be physically safe? And what kind of money would you need to ride out any consequences? And where can you get those things? And are Black women able to support you? If at a particular time the answer is no, sometimes you have to just walk by faith and just do what you're called to do, granted. But we as Black women, no matter where we fall in this argument, need to be prepared to not make martyrs out of Black women that speak out and not forget them. If Nicole Lewis loses her credentials, her professional credentials, she's going to need help for a while. I hope that doesn't happen to her. When Black women choose to speak out, there's a cost to it. People may need help with their families for extended periods of time. The problem about not moving in silence is that that's the conditions that this creates. Like I said, there's a difference between having 10 Black men hanging with you and 3 real criminals being in there, between having 10,000 and several thousand criminals in there. That's a different possibility. It can happen to anyone. So what are we prepared to do? I'm in a movement of silence crowd, but I care about my sisters who are not. So I would suggest we look at, okay, what resources are we going to need to make sure that Black women are safe when they speak out? What kind of things are we going to need to be able to provide and secure so there's physically safe places for them to go in their locales? What kind of things are we going to have to be able to provide so that people have money to live if they face severe reprisal economically? That's something I'm willing to talk to other Black women about. That's something I'm willing to work toward. I am convinced of my position, but not so much that I'm more interested in arguing about that position than I am about Black women being able to understand and enjoy all of their freedom. We cannot, we don't have enough control in the society to blunt all of the consequences that can happen in the speak out now side of this equation. We don't have those kind of resources. But what we can do is network together, given that there's 18 million of us, so that the freedom of our sisters, we don't have to agree with everything that everybody does to not let them be savaged by our mutual enemies, is my point. So things that we can do are working on for ourselves, building the resources and security that we need, and being able to secure resources so that we can help our sisters do the same. All right, I probably will not touch this subject again. I think I've exhausted everything I think about it, but we'll see what happens as the situation develops because we're only a few days into this. I hope that Ms. Lewis is allowed to just go on with her life and do what she feels she needs to do. This is my hope and my intercessory prayer on her behalf. If not, and there's a development worth talking about, we will be back. But and one thing I will be doing is if I get that information, I will put a community tab up because if we as Black women can make sure she has enough clientele, then she will not need to then depend on people that are disrespectful to her. That's one thing we can all do to help if you're in need of a therapist. And I'll probably start adding her to I always put in BetterHelp, but I'll also add her to my usually get some help things. I always put in better help and life coaching. When I know what her thing is, I'll add that to mine. That'll be my way of being able to make sure that Black women have access to her and she has access to a clientele that she feels respects her. And that will help her to navigate whatever comes next. So that's what I can do with my little non-monetized channel. Even though I'm in the moving silence crowd, I don't want a Black woman who speaks out to be hurt, to be harmed, to be ruined, because she has a right to that. We have a right with that. We have a right to that. And as someone who does a fair amount of speaking out, I'm probably more conservative in some ways, but as someone who speaks out, I do recognize that can happen to anyone. So um, I don't need to win the argument. What I would like to do is for us to work together to be able to make sure we all have the freedom to be able to make the moves we need to make for our personal safety and our personal sense that we are being respected in our work and that we have freedom to move around when we are not. All right. Thank you for listening to me think about this a second day in a row. And y'all have a good day now. Goodbye. And thank you. I'm continuing to pick up new subscribers. I believe we're at 875 now. We are 125 subscribers and about the same amount of, 175 watch hours away from being able to monetize, become part of the YouTube partner program, which means there'll be more resources for me to have. Because, you know, what Black women have, if we have the attitude of what I have, we have, that helps our position. And actually, that's another video. In order for us all to have freedom, we're going to have to put down that American individualist mindset. But that's a whole different conversation. Can't do it with this video, but I just put that thought out there. Like I said in the Winter Spring Bible study, you know, you're interceding and praying for people, and God says, I want you to take that resource over there that you were going to spend on yourself, and I want you to intercede. I want you ask for me to intercede. I'm going to intercede through your money. Now what? We want Black women to have freedom. What if it takes our resources to do it? You know, we had our American dream. We were gonna get that red bottom. We were gonna get that bag. We were gonna do the level up. And suddenly a Black woman is in need. Now what? That's no another conversation though. I just put that out there for your thought. If you're gonna be in the speak out now crowd, definitely get your money together. But we in the moving silence crowd are not gonna leave you to do it by yourself. We're just not gonna do that over here. Because we want for our sisters what we want for ourselves. Even if our sisters are choosing a different path to get there, we're all trying to get to the same place. All right. That's your second Baptist. My dad is a Baptist preacher. That's your second Baptist close. We're not going to do a third. Y'all have a good day now. Bye.